You know how there are so many videos on YouTube about juniors leaving investment banking, like this guy and this guy and this girl? Well, it did seem like there were a ton of videos about people leaving Corp Dev. So I thought I would change that with this video. Like LMAO, you're welcome. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm a 27-year-old self-made millionaire investor who created this channel mostly to share some of my favorite ideas and tips that have worked for me. Occasionally, I'll also share some little bit more unconventional career advice, which is going to be the subject of this video. So if you feel so inclined to support me along my journey, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It really helps out and keeps me motivated to keep putting out fresh content for you guys. If you haven't seen my previous video linked over here, I highly recommend you checking it out. It's a lot more comprehensive in terms of the pros and the cons of Corp Dev, and a lot more pros, honestly. I wouldn't have stayed as long in the industry as I did, which I guess 2 years is a long time, if I didn't actually like it. Overall, I thought it was a really great experience, right? The work-life balance is really solid. Pay can be relatively good, especially at the junior levels. You get to work on pretty cool stuff, mostly live transactions when things get busy. Overall, I didn't have a lot of complaints. But since this video, not to bore some of the viewers who've seen that one, is more focused on what's next and why I'm leaving, this will be a little bit more critical of a video focused on my personal experience and some of the cons. And the reason this is important is when you're at the beginning of your career, the world is metaphorically, not metaphysically, your oyster. You can do just about anything you want after IB or consulting or PE or what have you. But as you progress up the ladder, it becomes harder and harder to do so, and the opportunity cost of these decisions can be quite high. So before going into Corp Dev and doing something that makes it harder to switch into other industries, here are some things to keep in mind. Let me just say that at the junior levels, if you're coming in as an associate or senior associate or manager, the comp is really solid. It's really good at the junior levels, comparable to, on a per hour basis, what a mid-level IB associate at a bulge bracket would be making, if we're assuming that they're working 70 to 80 hours a week and you're working closer to 40 to 50. And this is especially true if we're looking at after-tax numbers. And unrelated to the comp, I also think that it's one of the best training grounds for a relatively young gun. You get to learn how to interact with senior managers, you get to work on deals, you get those deal reps in, you get to think to an extent like an investor. So it's pretty interesting and fairly meaningful work. Now, here come the cons. The first is that while the comp to start is pretty good, your progression in terms of your career will stall by quite a bit. Whereas it's pretty known that it's 2 years or 3 years as an analyst, then 3 as an associate, then potentially 3 to 4 as a VP, depending on how good you are. It's a bit less defined in corporate. You can find yourself stuck in the same role for 4, 5, 6 years, depending on the needs of the organization. And the second con is while the comp is pretty good, you're never really going to be pulling what the best engineers do. I had to get over thinking that, oh, my team was quote unquote special for some reason because we got to work on super secretive stuff. We are a small team. It's almost like there's so many engineers, they're like the army, and we're like the special forces. Except the key difference is that the army, they actually get better weapons, better equipment, they're better supported, they actually go out and win battles, they capture objectives, and so on. And we as a special forces, we get the recognition, but we don't really get paid for it. It doesn't matter if you graduated from HBS or GSB or you worked at Blackstone prior to your stint in Corp Dev, chances are the senior or principal engineer who has the technical abilities is going to get paid higher. So putting all this together, I would say that Corp Dev is a great terminal level role. It's great to make that 400 to 600K and chill, right? Because if you're an MD at a bulge bracket, chances are that's your base, and anything else beyond that you have to work for. It becomes eat what you kill, and it's highly group dependent. Whereas Corp Dev, once you have a family, once you're a little bit older, it can be nice to have, both a work life and then a personal life. Now, the cons come from mostly the progression and the limited availability in terms of getting to those senior positions. So if you didn't have, for instance, availability in your group to make it past a certain level, you can be stuck and you could find yourself bouncing around across different other Corp Dev roles, and that could take a longer time to get to your end goal than had you just stayed in finance. A lot of finance and consulting roles are considered +2 roles, which means for every 1 year that you spend in that industry, it's equal to 2 years in corporate. So if you can grind it out, the value maximizing play is to work in finance as long as possible and then move over to corporate at a higher level. Do I wish I did that to an extent? Yes. Absolutely. And it's one of those things that's harder to realize when you're grinding miserable 100, 110 hours a week as a junior and you just want out. But if you can power through and realize that the grass is greener on the other side once you pay your dues, then it is a very attractive value prop. Obviously, easier said than done. For me personally, I would say my case was a little bit different. I wasn't really motivated by the comp or the prestige associated with banking or private equity, so I never would have made it past, a certain level anyway. But I spent some time thinking about what I was good at, and for me, not to flex, but there are a lot of things that I'm terrible at, right? For instance, I picked up coding during the pandemic. I purchased this e-com platform to try to spin it up and make something out of it. And I hate to say it, but I'm probably a bottom 50% coder. On the other hand, I'd probably consider myself a top 1 to 5% public markets investor. And as this guy said, it's far better, far more worthwhile to focus on your strengths than trying to constantly improve upon your weaknesses. I firmly believe the way to win in the market is by having allocations across all market cycles, from investing in the best hypergrowth companies to benefiting from cyclicals during the early to mid cycles of an economic recovery. It's all about balance here. If you're watching this channel and some of my videos, you'll know that I've beaten some of the best institutional and public market celebrity investors by quite a comfortable margin, and by employing what I would call more of a risk management framework rather than aggressive growth, although returns have been pretty sweet as well. And I have to say, it's not a really common exit op, but I was fortunate enough to find a fund that was willing to take a chance on me, realized I had a track record and what seemed like a real passion for investing, and took a chance. While I'm still early on the public market side, I'm confident in saying that for the first time in maybe 6 to 7 years, I'm finally doing something that I really, really enjoy in finance. And for you guys, that means that I have more exposure to institutional thinking. I'm continuing to hone my public markets craft. And when I go on YouTube to share some of my best ideas, hopefully that knowledge, that education will be reflected in some of my future videos. Now, obviously, everybody is different. A lot of guys I know who've worked in corp dev are now moving on to operating or venture or other strategy roles, and they're really loving it. This is just my personal experience, my personal take, and what I decided to do with that experience. So obviously your mileage will vary. But thank you guys so much for watching. As always, nothing is more valuable than your time, except for maybe your money, and I absolutely hope to see you guys on the next one.